Hello and welcome to another episode of Sound and Soul of the South. Charles Davis over here, Susie Cowan over there. And if you are noticing, I'm going to let them in on the joke. It's not a joke, it's just a thing. Behind her is a beautiful, beautiful photo of the one and only Johnny Cash, the man in black. And that is kind of a hint at what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be heading to the state of Arkansas to talk about all things about the boyhood home of Johnny Cash and a ton of other things as well. So I didn't even get to say this. How are you doing, Susie?
I'm just out here living the dream.
That's all we can do, Susie. That's all we can do. This one, we are going to be splitting up duties on this one. I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Adam Long, the executive director over the historical sites at Arkansas State University. And who did you get to talk to, Susie?
I got to talk to Penny Toombs, the assistant director of the A-State Heritage Sites, and you'll be able to tell I might know these guys a little bit.
You might know, she might have a little bit of a history with these people, but that is a great thing because we get to talk about Johnny Cash and all the things that are associated with him, the things that you can see when you go down there to Dyess and check out all the things. And so this is going to be a great
cool.
History lesson, not only just about Johnny, but the entire environment that was the place that he lived growing up. So without further ado, let's talk to Dr. Adam Long. Welcome back to Sound and Soul of the South. Charles Davis here with you, and I'm now joined by a great member of Arkansas State University, Mr. Adam Long. Good morning, Adam. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Charles. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for being here. We've got a lot to talk about, especially when we're talking about the man that we're talking about, but there's a lot around that as well. First off, let the people know, Adam, what you do with Arkansas State University.
Yes, so I'm the executive director of Arkansas State University's Heritage Sites program. So we operate 4 historic sites in eastern Arkansas along the Mississippi River, including the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home.
Yeah, no, and that's a part of what we want to talk about, but I want to get into a lot of the other stuff there. What is I know you manage a lot of these sites, but kind of what is like the mission of what you all are doing over there at Arkansas State?
Sure. So, our sites have a common story. They're about the agricultural history of the Arkansas Delta, and that's where our university is located in the Delta as well. Started out as an A&M school, so we're very much involved in that history as well. And so, part of our purpose is to preserve that history and to make it available for members of the public. But the university also has a interdisciplinary heritage studies PhD program. So our sites also serve as labs for our graduate students.
Oh no, that is awesome, being able to not only preserve this stuff, but to pass it on down into future hands of generations. So that is a great thing there. Like I said, multiple sites on this that you all handle and manage. But one of the big pieces is you all do manage the boyhood home of Johnny Cash. So first off, let's talk about the town that you're in. It's Dyess, Arkansas, right?
Yes, Dyess. It's Dyess, but it said Dice like like what you play board games with.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the city itself, and the town and kind of how it got started, because it started off as a colony, correct?
Yes, correct. So it started officially was dedicated in 1935. So some families started moving in 1934, but it was a New Deal resettlement colony. So this was the Great Depression, and so of course that's a national phenomenon. But in Arkansas, we had the addition of the 1927 flood of the Mississippi, the biggest flood on record, that wiped out crops a few years before the bank failures and Dust Bowl and all of that. So, there were many responses to this crisis, economic crisis. One of them was was President Roosevelt's New Deal, where they established resettlement colonies around the country. Ours was agriculture based. Was mostly farm families that were being relocated, but there were resettlement colonies in other parts of the country with other, based on other industries, mining towns, factories, all kinds of things. But Dyess was agricultural resettlement colony number 1. and the founding uh, director W.R. Dyess died tragically in a plane crash in the 30s, and they renamed the colony after
Yeah.
him. So after that, it became Dyess Colony, which does kind of roll off the tongue a little bit better than agricultural colony number one. So
A bit, yeah.
yeah,
Uh, but no, that whole New Deal thing, because that Roosevelt implementing that across the country was a big deal. No pun intended there. Um, with the place that the country was in with the depression. Then for you to
sure.
mention, I totally forgotten about that. The flood that just kind of wiped everything out. So it was bad across the country, but it feels like in the colony it was a bit worse. So when we talk about that, kind of, what have you all seen as far as like what was the makeup of the people, like the mentality of the people during that time? Because that had to have been a time where you had to come from hardy stock to live in a place like that at the time.
Sure. Yeah, you definitely did. The colony was set up for 500 families, all from Arkansas. Um, like I said, there were colonies around the country, so other colonies for other places, but
Mm-hmm.
this was families from all 75 counties in Arkansas. Um, there ended up set up for 500, ended up being something like 483 farmsteads because the
Yeah,
river places by the river ended up not working out, that kind of thing.
yeah,
But in addition to that, there were federal workers. There was a hospital, school, cannery, factories, uh, these sorts of things. So there was, handful of uh, those farmsteads mostly, but then there were
hmm,
also, a town center with federal workers. And one of the really interesting things about Dice is that the federal government was experimenting with all kinds of socialized programs to,
mm,
home economists, these farming co-ops, these factories and sort of things that were, other forms of New Deal experimentation that didn't necessarily last
yeah,
outside of the Depression and on into the
yeah.
40s in the way the farms did. Um, but we're very, very interesting in the context of the times.
Well, yeah, it just feels like it was Dice Colony was chosen to be experimental in some pieces. When it comes to that, they had to try out new things. They had to try to figure a way to get the economic engine of America running again. So yeah, it might have been throwing things up against the wall, seeing if it sticks. If it works, okay, cool. If it doesn't, we'll move on. But that leads into how we get to the point to where this became the boyhood home of Johnny Cash. So kind of talk about how the Cash family made their way into this town.
Sure. So the Cash family was at the time in Cleveland County, Arkansas, in a town called Kingsland, kind of south central Arkansas, an hour and a half south of Little Rock. Um, and Johnny was 3 years old at the time. He was called JR at the time. Johnny was a stage name,
Yeah,
everybody in the family knows him as JR. Yeah, and the family needed assistance, applied for the colony, and moved there in 1935 when JR was 3 years old,
yeah,
and continued to live in the colony, until Johnny now, I guess, made it and was able to move the family
yeah,
into Memphis first, and then kind of, uh, around with him over the
yeah,
years after
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and it's to like you said, you were talking about the area that he was growing up in and the times that he was growing up in. It only to me makes sense that of the influence that living in that colony under the circumstances bred the type of man that he ended up becoming. What have you all seen about the history of him being down there that you all can kind of parallel to like the stuff that he kind of learned? I'm thinking like the hard work ethic and things like that through being there, but kind of what have you all seen has been the correlation between what he kind of became and what the city gave him as he was growing up?
Sure. I think that, one thing that's hard to communicate if you visit now, after World War II, and later parts of the 20th century, as farm equipment became mechanized and farming operations became massive. Uh, Dyess, the population dwindled. There weren't 20-acre farms anymore. There were
Yeah, yeah,
huge farms farmed by, farm families that live in other towns and these sorts of things. And so now when you visit, it feels like this house is preserved because of its historic importance, but
yeah,
not all the houses are preserved, and it feels like, oh well, he lived out in the middle of nowhere, and you have to be self-reliant and pull yourself up by your bootstraps to do that. Um, but I think what's lost is what a big community it was.
yeah,
500 families, um, probably about 5,000 people in the colony, a school, a hospital, lots of families and kids around, and that sort of thing. And if you hear Johnny talk about Dyess, he remembers it as a representation of how important it is for people in a community to help each other out
yeah,
and to
yeah,
help to lift each other up. And so I think it really shows up in things like his work for prison reform
hmm,
or his songs like Man in Black, where he's really um, highlighting the plight of the impoverished and those, needing help.
yeah,
Um, and so definitely they would have been hard workers and that too. But I think that the community there was unique for him.
yeah, yeah. I think just from hearing you talk about that, Adam, it is the part about him, the caring part of him, like I said, caring about
Mhm.
people in less fortunate
Yeah.
situations, the work that he did with the indigenous people of this country, going and recording the albums and doing all those things and really being in touch with the surroundings around him and not just being so isolated and thinking about himself when it comes to that. Well, let's talk about the house a little bit. It has been fully
Sure.
restored back to its original 30s and 40s glory from what I have read. So kind of talk about the house and what the house entails right now.
Sure. So yes, it's been restored to when the Cashes lived there. They moved in 1934. Lived there. Johnny graduated high school in 1950. Shortly after that, the family moved into town, into the town center there in Dyess. They continued to live in Dyess for several more years after Johnny left. But the main period was while he was there from
Hmm.
3 to 18. Yeah, and so when you move to Dyess, you receive 20 acres that you then over the next few years paid back the WPA for. 1 acre was cleared and had a house built on it. There were 8 different styles of houses. It was government housing that they
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
had designs. They shipped it in by train and assembled
Hmm.
assembled
Hmm.
there. And so it's one of 8 styles there. Um, it's 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a dining room. And there would have been 6 kids, 2 adults living there. So,
In that space,
um,
yeah.
yeah, so not large for, by our standards now,
Hmm.
but compared to the shotgun shacks on many
Of course.
sharecropping farms in the South, pretty nice for the time.
Oh yeah, a mansion compared to everything else. When
Yeah.
you look at it, but it, like you say, it is not of the scale that we think of in a big house at that
Sure.
point, and to have that that it makes it more of a tight knit thing when you're in those types of spaces and you're in spaces of that nature. So you have that house on the site, and like I said, we talked about it a bit. You have a lot of the other stuff dealing with the New Deal and showing the impact that it has. With it being on or being associated with the campus and being associated with Arkansas State University, kind of what are the students' reactions when they start to interact with the image and the legacy and the memory of what Johnny meant to that part of the country?
Yeah, we have a lot of graduate. We have a pretty large contingent of uh, international students that work in
Mm,
our program, and I think that's interesting. Of course, a lot of Arkansans know the story of Johnny
mhm,
Cash,
mhm.
but among our international students, it's interesting because they've often heard the name. Cash continues to be popular internationally. Maybe they know him for one song or something,
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that, not the
yeah,
full legacy, but
yeah.
enough to recognize him, but don't know anything about the New Deal heritage or the Great Depression, at least
Mhm.
in terms of the story in the American South. But of course, the Great Depression, global phenomenon, and these sorts of
Very true.
things, can relate very much to things that happened in other parts of the world. So I think um, uh, yeah, I think they're surprised by that history of it.
Yeah, of the history of that, and that makes sense, and that kind of rounds us into my next question as well. Being, as you said, the New Deal and the Great Depression wasn't a singular regional incident; it was a national epidemic that happened, and I think that that is an important thing when you talk about the South in general. So that leads me into this piece about we talk about music tourism and tourism in general, but in some ways, I believe we think and we look at it upon as the South is a little bit different. How do you view, music tourism and things like that, but tourism about the New Deal and tourism about all of that? What do you think about the South that makes it unique to other places that can have certain stuff like this? What makes being in the South with this so special?
Yeah, I think the South is um, especially important to the formation of some of the biggest Americana themes, of food and music, for instance, but also things like the Mississippi River, the first kind of really super highway in the country before the railroads came along,
Yeah,
right? And that are so iconic to American history. Um, that yeah, and um, I think they are themes that connect, that are associated with America throughout the country, but have unique roots in the South.
yeah, yeah. I love that you brought up the thing about the Mississippi because that is the thing to me that is the through line, in my opinion, of it is that everything had to come through the South at some point, and that's how news traveled before you had the internet or newspapers, before the railroad. That's how music traveled. That's how food traveled. That's how stories and traditions traveled. And to me, that is a big piece to why it is important there as well. So, as I always like to ask anybody that we do this show with, and especially with this, if somebody decides, you know what, I love hearing from Adam. I love what they've got going on. I would love to know more about this. And if they decided they wanted to come down and hang out with you all and experience everything that they could, from Johnny Cash to everything, what would you tell them to do when they came to visit you all?
Yeah, so Dyess is located about 45 minutes north of Memphis. So Memphis is our easiest entry point for,
Okay.
by air and, by major interstate and those sorts of things. And of course, Memphis has all kinds of music history for those who are, really interested in exploring music, particularly Sun Studios with our connection to Johnny Cash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then, we at the in Dyess we have a museum on the and visitor center on the Colony Circle there, where you can start and tour the exhibitions, and then sign up for a guided tour out to the house. We also nearby operate the Southern Tenant Farmers Museum, which we always recommend to people. It's only 15 minutes away, and
Okay.
it's the headquarters of an agricultural union that was founded in 1934. So Dyess is this, federal response to the Great Depression. Well, this
Hmm.
is the same time an organized labor response, and it's unique in that it was voluntarily integrated in the 30s and had both
Mm,
men and women in leadership positions in the 30s. So it's an important step, and uh, uh, some of those folks served as mentors for that next generation, in the
yeah.
civil rights movement. And it's a connected but um, less known story,
Hmm.
I think, and worth visiting. And then I would also recommend in the Arkansas Delta, especially Helena, Arkansas, about an hour south of Memphis. Longest running blues radio program still
Okay.
is broadcast every weekday. It's called King Biscuit Time, named after its sponsor, King Biscuit Flour.
Yeah.
But they have a big blues festival in the fall, and slightly different style of music, of course, but
Yeah.
also an important American form of music. Um, and just outside of Helena is also in a little town called Marvel is the Levon Helm Boyhood Home. Another big name in
Yeah.
Americana music.
Yeah, yeah, no, it sounds absolutely amazing. And like I said, for all the work that you all are doing, that you and your entire staff are doing down there at Arkansas State, to preserve, as I said, this history of not only Johnny, but the New Deal and what the Depression was and how these people not only survived but ended up thriving out of this. And as you said, laying down the foundations of some of the most American ideas that you can have were formulated in places like Dyess Colony, and we saw the fruits of that labor when we got to see what JR, as they call him, what Johnny turned out to be. Adam, thank you so much for being here with us today. Greatly appreciate you for all of the information.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you for all that you all are doing over there at Arkansas State.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Well, welcome back to Sound and Soul. We are here with Penny Toombs from the Boyhood Home of Johnny Cash with Arkansas State University. Welcome to the podcast, Penny.
Hey, thanks for having me, Susie. Is so glad to be here.
I know this is so exciting.
Yeah.
It's so exciting because, well, number one, Johnny Cash, and number two, I'm just so happy to be talking to you about this.
I know. I love it. I love to talk about Johnny. We've got Johnny looking at us in both settings. Yay.
That's right. That's right. The Man in Black, man. So many fun stories we could start with, but I think that what I'd like to start with is the events that your annual events you do around the Boyhood Home of Johnny Cash. Let's start there.
Hey, that's great. Our biggest event is coming up in September 19th. We have Roseanne Cash comes. She's wonderful, comes every year and invites some of her friends to join her. And it's a really cool, unique, intimate experience. It's called the Sunken Songwriting Circle. So this year, Roseanne is coming with her wonderful, talented husband, John Leventhal, and Ruthie Foster, who has her first Sun record coming out like any day, and then Rhett Miller. They're all going to be joining on stage. So, unlike just a regular concert, when they get up there and perform a few songs, they will actually be on stage together, talk about their songwriting process, and, really tell those stories to the audience. So, the audience feels like they're part of the conversation. So, it's just a cool thing. But there's more. Before that is the reception. So, would you like for me to tell you about the reception?
Absolutely, might even have been my favorite part.
All right. So, starting at 5:30 on September 19th, we open the doors and we're at the Fowler Center in Jonesboro, Arkansas. So, people come in and there's this grand hall and we have it set up with just there's a whole line of food. In the middle of that is the guitar. Martin Guitar is kind enough to donate us a cash edition guitar each year that we have the artist sign, and then we keep one and put up in the museum. The other one we auction off. So it is like a centerpiece, just incredible. And then we have all kinds of different foods. Now, the special thing about that is the recipes for these items come from Carrie Cash's cookbook. So Johnny's mom, Carrie, created a cookbook.
Amazing.
And yeah, so we take those and we sit down with our food folks here on campus, and we go through the recipes and say, oh, what do we think about this year? And they take those recipes, and the theme this year is going to be albums, which you'll be excited about, the different decades of albums. And then we put her food items to that. So, it's just such an incredible event to where, people come and they get to eat, which is included with ticket price. They get to look at the silent auction gifts. They get to mingle. We have drinks, custom made drinks from Delta Dirt Distillery, which I know, but your audience, if they haven't had Delta Dirt Distillery, it is incredible. So,
Absolutely.
all that's included in the ticket price. You get food, you get free drinks, and then you get a concert.
Man, it was so. I have to say, I went last year, and it was such an amazing experience. And it's just something so special, and you actually feel the spirit of Johnny there with his mom's recipes and his daughter
Yes.
on stage, and
Yes.
it's just such a wonderful a way to immerse yourself in the world that Johnny, I don't want to say created, but what he was surrounded by.
Absolutely. And not
Yeah,
just his, big entertainment persona that he had, but really tying in those roots, kind of bringing everything together, like full circle. You've got where he grew up. We have pictures of the house. We have little notes set out about the recipe and what that meant to the family, if it was his favorite dessert or whatever that might be. So you get that feeling that you're almost sitting in the house, dining with the Cash family, and get a little bit of sneak peek into like what they would have had and what they would have prepared for the family.
Man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And you brought up the boyhood home of Johnny Cash.
Mhm.
So I know there's another story about
Mhm.
how the house was decorated. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yes, that was incredible. Incredible process. So it was in horrible shape when Arkansas State University acquired it. It was on the list of most endangered houses. So um, they got it, and input from Tommy and Joanne, which were Johnny's only two living siblings, that were alive at the time. Bless Tommy, he has since passed, but during that process, they were communicating constantly with, for instance, the flower pots underneath the windows. Mama Cash kept purple and white flowers, sometimes pink, in those flower boxes. So that's what we keep there. We honor that. Um, on the inside, we have the quilt rack is still where it was. Her quilt, her actual quilt with her purse is on the end of the bed where it would have sat many of times. One of the pictures that Johnny made frames, which he was JR, born JR, so you'll hear me say both names. One of the picture frames that he had made, and one of the pictures that he had put in there from a magazine, the family gave us items to put in that house. And just things that we couldn't get, like, for instance, the dining room table. And by dining room table, when I mean kitchen table, it sounds fancy, but um, we would send, or they would send pictures to the family and say, hey, what do you think about this? How does this look? And they would get it as close to the original as possible. Like, for instance, the couch ended up coming from California.
Wow.
So much effort went into making that as authentic as possible. And thanks to the Cash family for giving us that insight, because we wouldn't have known.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to interject here and say that my first visit to the boyhood home of Johnny Cash was in 2018. It's when the
Mhm.
Arkansas Governor's Conference on Tourism was in West Memphis, and we
Mhm.
took a trip over. And I'm so glad I did because Joanne Cash sang to us on the porch.
Yes.
And I thought that was the coolest thing in the entire world. Johnny's sister sang to us on the porch of their childhood home.
Yeah, we the last time that she visited, it was one of my, top 10 moments in my life. She wanted to have a meal in the house, and so we invited her family, cousins came in. We had like 17 folks there, and we set up in the house at the table, used Mama Cash's recipes, and cooked for them. And so, I just stood back looking in, and Joanne sat down and she said, "Mama sat there, Papa sat there, JR sat there." And I'm telling you, I still get chills thinking about it. It was just such an incredible experience. And that's what I love about the family. They still
Mm.
remember that place and the roots. And, Joanne, we've got a video of her looking out that window in the kitchen and remembering when her mom stood there and she was by her side and first realized that JR had a gift, heard him singing while he was going out to pump the water. And so just those kinds of things, it's just incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And I'm just so grateful to Arkansas State University, the way they have protected and preserved this
Sure.
for the family, for all of us to learn more about Johnny so we can immerse
Yes,
ourselves in, what he was surrounded with.
absolutely. And you hear
Um,
him saying, "We, me." I wish I was there for the entire process, and I feel like I was on restoration, but of course, that started with Dr. Ruth Hawkins and
mm,
Paula Miles and then
yep,
Dr. Adam
yep,
Locke. So, I came along a little later in the game, but I've heard so many of the stories and experienced so many things. I feel like I was part of it, which I think is one of the special things that our museum does, and even the Arkansas Delta as a whole. You
yep.
feel like you're part of the family. So,
That's right. That's right. And the two ladies you just mentioned, I have said it more than once. I feel like Dr. Ruth Hawkins and Paula Miles kind of built the tourism industry in the
Mhm.
Arkansas Delta.
Yes.
Maybe not built, but preserved it with their own hands. I've heard stories of them painting houses, making
Yes.
recipes, decorating.
Yes. All
I
kinds of
love that so
things.
much. Oh yes, well
So they
they're
paved the way,
absolute treasures.
absolutely.
Absolute treasures, and what you and Dr. Adam Long have done to continue the preservation and the storytelling, we are all just so grateful.
Yes.
But in true Susie and Penny fashion, we
Mhm.
jumped right through the conversation and started talking about the fun stuff, the
Of
food and the
course.
recipes. So let's take a step back and talk about your other event other than Sunken Lands, Roots
Sure.
Festival.
The Arkansas Roots Music Festival, yes, it is in April of each year. We time it around. There's a Delta Symposium held here on campus, which is fabulous. So we have all kinds of workshops during the day leading up Thursday and Friday leading up to the Saturday concert. But yeah, we set up a stage in front of the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home, and we have Arkansas artists that come and perform live throughout the afternoon. So each one will do like a 40-minute set. We'll switch in between. The past several years, it's been hosted by the fabulous Aaron Enderlin.
Mm,
And just, we've had Cliff and Susan, which I know you're familiar with these names. I hope your audience will look them up. They're incredible.
they are.
Adam Cambrick, Sophie
Mhm.
Smithson, just incredible artists there. We've had blues, and
Yes.
I just love it. It's such a special experience to be there and to just stand back and look, and you have this artist performing, and you see Johnny's house in the back, and you just that feeling you get. It's just incredible.
And both of these events are fundraisers for the Boyhood Home, correct?
Yes, yes, that is true. The Sunken Lands concert is our biggest fundraiser of the year. Like I said, we have probably 5 to 7 items on silent auction that are incredible, like the guitar. And then we also auction off a meal for 6 in the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home. So,
Wow.
whoever wins that gets to come set up a time, and we'll use Mama Cash's recipes, and they'll eat at the table in the Cash house. So that's another. We have really special, gifts. We have some signed merch from the artist and from John Carter Cash. So we just have a Wilson package, which we'll talk about Wilson a little bit more in a bit. But yeah, we have some really incredible things that we auction off. And our buddies down in Nashville, the Johnny Cash Museum, they're always fabulous about sending us some stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Man, these events are so special, so unique. And if you want to learn more about Johnny Cash and his music, this is the perfect place to go and experience it
Yes.
all.
It is.
So
What's important about the fundraiser is its ongoing preservation. With any older home, there are restorations to do. And, the house is so precious, and it's such a gem. Along with, on our circle, we have, of course, the administration building and the original historic Dyess colony, entities that it's just so important to preserve those. So we
yes,
don't lose what we have.
that's right. And I'm just so grateful that y'all have done such a great job and that A State has really stepped up to the plate when it comes to
Yes.
heritage in the Delta.
Yes.
Because it would just be such a shame for these stories to not be
Yes.
told and not
That's
have the
right.
opportunity to really learn more about Johnny, who he was as a person.
That's right.
That really, that was the heart of how that music happened. Um,
Absolutely. I just want to shout out real quick on that note. One of the things we do a lot of programming with kindergarten through 12th grade. And
mhm,
one of the things that I always do with them is, they've probably heard of the Man in Black or Johnny Cash, but we sit and we listen to the lyrics, and I have them printed off of the song Man in Black, because it tells you where his heart was at, what kind of person he really was. Was he a bad boy? Yes. Did he get in trouble? Yes. But those things he stood for, the poor and beaten down, and just, if you haven't ever, I know you have, but any of your audience listen to those lyrics, really listen to those, and it tells you what kind of person he was.
So if somebody's coming over to the Arkansas Delta for the Johnny Cash experience at the Boyhood Home,
Mhm.
and let's say they had 72 hours, where would they go? What would they do? What would they eat, sleep,
Oh,
other
goodness.
musical
So many
destinations?
options, so many options. So yeah, I mean, there are a few options I'm going to throw out here. So Jonesboro, which is where I'm actually in right now, my office is based on campus. Jonesboro has a fabulous downtown area with live music. They have, shops owned by locals. It's just, there's so much to do and see here. Breweries. It's just a great experience. And of course, our hotels, you have your Embassy Suites, your Comfort Inn. And when I'm saying that, I know the folks that operate both of those, so it's just continues that family type experience. There's just really good folks here. So you could do a day in Jonesboro, check out what there is, around here. The shooting complex, our nature center. Then go on down. If you're going to visit the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home, which you have to,
That's
it's
right.
in a little town, Dyess, Arkansas, population 339. Right beside that, we have one of our other museums, 15 miles away, the Southern Tenant Farmers Museum in Tyronza. Incredible story. I call that our hidden gem. We can do a session about that another time. But then on down the road from there is Wilson, Arkansas, which
Mm,
has an incredible vibe going on. They have a boutique hotel. They have the Wilson Cafe. They
which
have
is
a
fabulous.
chef that makes, I mean, just incredible. They have live music just about every night as well, and especially for
Well,
sure on the weekends. Seasonal according to, winter or summer, but fabulous there. You have the National Cold War Museum in Blytheville.
mhm,
You have moving on to Sultana Disaster Museum in Marion. Then you have West Memphis and the Blues. They have a blues festival, so you could time it around that. And then going on to Helena. I love and adore Helena. They have the Edwardian Inn, which is such a unique experience to stay in. I hope that everybody looks that up and goes by. Food's great. And then, of course, you have Delta Dirt Distillery that you can go and visit there, which they are generational farmers of sweet potatoes who have taken and made their own gin and vodka out of their sweet potatoes, internationally recognized. So, you can meet Harvey and Thomas there. They'll tell you about their story. And because you've experienced, they welcome you in just like your family as well. So they ship all over. So I just love the folks at Delta Dirt Distillery. Yeah, and then go on further down to Stuttgart. If anybody's a hunter, that's the duck hunting capital of the world. So there is so much to do in the Delta. Fishing, hunting. I'm trying to think of all the different things, and there's just so many, with music being the center that ties us all together from the top of the Delta to the bottom, because you have Louis Jordan, that's Sister Rosetta Tharpe, you have Marvel and the home of Levon Helm. I mean, there's so much here. So yeah, that's a 72-hour or 1 week trip you could come and spend in the Delta.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on, Penny, and telling us all about the Boyhood Home of Johnny Cash, Sunken Lands Festival, the Arkansas Delta Roots Festival. And those are annual events. And so if you can't make it this year, put it on your calendar for next year. And I think we should all just go visit the Boyhood Home of Johnny Cash.
Absolutely. Let me know and I'll meet everybody and we'll have a big party.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Penny.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, that is the conclusion of this week's episode. Oh my gosh, we learned everything about the Boyhood Home of Johnny Cash. And I kind of need to try some of those recipes that they're doing down there.
I know.
I need to check that out. But it seemed like you and Penny had a great time talking to each other.
She invited us to come down for the Sunken Lands Songwriter Circle anytime, and that's where they do those appetizers from Mama Cash's cookbook. So, when you're ready to take a trip to the Arkansas Delta, just let me know.
That's going to have to happen here real soon. We want to thank a few places and people who are doing all the great things down there. Once again, we want to thank the Boyhood Home of Johnny Cash. We want to thank the people over at Arkansas State University. And we want to thank the Delta Byways Regional Tourism Association for everything they are doing to cultivate these areas and to provide this space, not only for the people that are here now, but for future generations. So it's a great one. Great job there, Susie. Once again, phenomenal job. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you go to streamthecreek.com and check out all the podcasts that we have there, not just this one. But with that being said, this is the end of this episode of Sound and Soul of the South Soul for Charles Davis and Susie Cowan. We will see y'all next time.